Hey guys, so what I'm going to try to do for everyone today is provide as detailed and as easy as to follow setup for my UI, all my ACT stuff, and kind of just the whole overview as well as kind of going into some of the specifics behind uh, why I do some of what I do. I figured the first thing to start off with would be the easiest, would be just the UI itself, and then we'll move into the ACT stuff. So for just my UI setup, I'm sure you guys have noticed that my stuff is very, very minimalistic. It's how I prefer to play. Regardless of what class I'm playing, I always go for a pretty, you know, pretty easy symmetrical layout in the middle of my screen that allows me to see everything I need to see to play the class correctly, with minimizing as much as I can from the rest of the screen. And this is how I choose to play just about every class in the game. I create something like this. So to kind of go over that idea, so in HUD Layout we have these 4 different slots, and I use 2 different ones for most of my classes, and I put all my setups between these 2 based on kind of how I want the layout to be, but we're just going to focus on the Bard one. Alright, so some tips I can give here are pretty much everything is just these hotbars that I've laid in certain places. And of course we know we can go into the UI element setups for each hotbar. We can change, how they display as far as the rows, how they're laid out, and we can, change their sizes and everything like that. So the way I kind of do this is I just lay out some bars on the side, one at the bottom. I put my song gauges right in the middle. I have this one bar that only has one ability on it for the refulgent arrow, and that's what I use to track my GCD timing. And then I keep my enfeeblements and enhancements on the side over here so they're easy to see. I have my target cast bar right here, so it's easy for me to see that and watch it when I'm doing raiding or anything really. And then I keep the enemy list over here to the side, just so it's easy for me to select through different enemies if I need to, or be able to see if I have aggro on or something, or anything of that nature. And then that's pretty much everything I need to see as far as what's going on related to me playing my class. I keep this target info and stuff down here just kind of out of the way, easy enough for me to see it and watch it, but I'm not really concerned with that. Mostly I just need to see everything right here in the very center of my screen. And kind of my philosophy behind keeping everything in the center of the screen is, instead of having something that I need to watch that's, way out here on the side or, over here, the idea is you try to keep your eyes as much as you can in the middle. Because if you have to constantly change your focus from the very center screen to the corner over here and then back, there's a certain amount of latency in that, you're focusing on something else and then you have to readjust your eyes back to the center of your screen or wherever you're looking at. And so my idea is to keep everything in the center, and that way I can see everything in my peripheral, and I can always focus. And if I do need to slightly adjust my eyes over to see the status and stuff like that, then it's not a big movement, and so I can pretty much just see everything by staring directly at the center of my screen. And of course, when you're doing savage fights or raids or whatever, whatever you're fighting is typically right in front of you in the center of the screen as well. So it allows you to watch what's going on around you. It allows you to watch everything as far as your rotation goes that you need to see. So that's kind of my idea and my philosophy behind my setup. And one last thing I'll go over with my UI is kind of my hotbar setup. This might be useful to someone, I'm not really sure. So I play without my hotbars on because I know where all my buttons are, so I don't need to see them. I know where everything's bound at. And so my idea here is I use 1 through 8. I use Shift 1 through 8 and Control 1 through 8 for all my abilities. And then for my keyboard buttons, I use F, Q, I use E and R, Z, and X. And on some classes I'll use C as well. It just kind of depends, but on Bard I don't. And so by using all of, 1 through 8 and then these keyboard buttons, I found that this is the best way for me to play. I have all my song abilities like on Shift F and Q, and then Raging Strikes is Z, and Arm's Length is X. Yeah, that's a really big important one, I would say. It allows you to easily know where Arm's Length is, and that's really important in raids. And you can see on here, right, this is for my barrage, it's my E button. But on this refulgent arrow right here, there's not it doesn't actually show a button, but the button that's bound to it is Shift E. I got annoyed at the fact that it shows the little, the key press that's assigned to that slot. And I found that you can actually remove that by going into the keybinds. And so let's see, find hotbar. I know that one is hotbar 10. And so right here. So if you assign a keybind and key setting 2, it won't actually display it over the hotbar. So for example, if I change this to Shift E, then you can see it. But if I put it under key setting 2, Shift E, then I don't have to see that. Not a huge thing, but just a small little thing to know in case you're trying to get your setup looking exactly how you want it. But yeah, that's the overall idea of my UI setup. It's really just arranging these different hotbars in these different positions, and then for certain hotbars I've assigned certain keybinds to them, and you can do that all through the key binding. And overall, this is pretty much the whole layout. One thing some people don't know is on the target bar of the enemy, you can, so if there's this option that says display target info independently, if you don't have that checked, everything's all in just one frame. But when it's checked, you can split out just the target bar, you can split out the status info of the target, and you can split out the cast bar right here into 3 different separate frames. And I highly recommend you do that, because then you can take that cast bar and put it wherever you want. It's easy for you to see, and you can adjust the size of the cast bar to make it as big as you need it to be. So that's a really big tip. Being able to see the cast bar of of whatever you're fighting against is really important to understanding how to time what's going on and do mechanics. All right, so that's the basic idea behind the UI. And again, you can import my config, I'll put in the description, and you can play around with mine and see if you like it. It's totally up to you. All right, so one last thing I guess I can show to you is so you'll probably notice I'm switching between these different hotbar setups, which is just these HUD layouts right here. And I have a macro for each of those HUD layout slots that I've bound to Alt 1 through 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, that type of thing. So you make a macro for those, and all it is HUD layout 1, and then HUD layout 2, and 3 and 4. And then I assign them to this bar over here, which is hotbar 8 in my case. And then what I did is I went into the keybinds for this hotbar, and I applied these 4 slots to Alt 1, 2, 3, 4. So something that might make your life easier if you choose to do so. All right, so that covers all the UI stuff. Let's go over ACT, and this is a pretty daunting one. So it is going to take a little bit to really cover all this, but I'll try to make this as simple as I possibly can. All right, so everyone's been pretty much focused on one aspect of my layout here, and what it is these trackers. So I'm going to go through how to create these and set these up and how they actually function in the game. So the first step is, obviously you'll need to have ACT installed and working. There's tons of information out there about how to get this installed and set up, so I don't think it's really worthwhile for me to go through it, because that's a whole thing in itself. It can be easy for some, or provide problems for others, but there are tons of resources out there for you to find information, and some of it's just trial and error. So what I will be showing is from the beginning of, let's say you just installed ACT and your goal is to set up those trackers. So what you'll need to do is download this add-on, this plugin called Hojorang, if that's how you pronounce it. And so what we'll do is we'll just go to Google and we'll just type it in. So FFXIV, Hojorang. And it'll be this first link right here on GitHub. All right. And all we want to do is just find the latest release of this plugin. So we can go over here to releases, and we can see right here 9.1.0 is the latest one, and you'll just download this this zip file right here. I'll go ahead and pull it in. All right. So, and you'll get, this is everything in that zip file, a bunch of these DLLs and some resources. So what you'll want to do is take all of this and set yourself up in this manner. So I go into my ACT folder, and I have a folder here specifically for this plugin, and I just drop everything in there. You don't want to drop it into the root of the ACT tracker itself. Some of the plugins can cause issues, so you kind of just want to make its own folder here and then drop everything in that zip file in here. And then once you have that, essentially you go into ACT, you go into the plugin listing, and you browse. And all you're going to look for is in that folder where you dropped all those files, you're going to look for one called specialspelltimer.dll. And there's information on how to set this up, and I think that she provides some as well on her site where we downloaded it at. Let's see. Yeah, she's got some README and some install notes here as well on how to set it up that you can look over. But we want to browse for the special spell timer and then hit open. And then once you do that, it's going to show up in your list right here as ACT special spell timer.dll. Make sure it's enabled, and it'll say plugin started. And what that will do is give you these two tabs right here. When you start ACT, it will automatically update this plugin. If there's updates available, you can also force an update if you want to. But you don't really have to worry about that for the most part. What we want to focus on is this SPE plugin tab right here. And you'll notice that there's this SPE over here as well in our ACT, that's this toggable option. So you'll want to make sure it's toggled, otherwise it's not going to show up if it's not. So make sure that that's orange, and then it'll actually be enabled as well. And when you do this, you'll kind of have a blank slate here. You won't have all these spell panels or these spell trackers that I've created myself. I will export these as well. So, and I'll provide those down below so you can actually import these if you so choose to do so. But I think it's really important to understand how they work and how these are set up. Not so much that you might have things you want to do differently, or certain abilities you want to track for different classes, or even on Bard that I don't, and understanding how to use this is very useful. So what I'm going to do right here is I'm actually going to export one of these just to figure out how this works. Let's do a new folder in here. And then, so if I wanted to import that, say, you know, I didn't have one here. So if you're just pulling it from my link in the description, you just right click in white space and hit import. You navigate to the spell XML document, and then you hit open, and it's just going to pull it straight into your ACT plugin. So that could be an easy way. If you just want to go off what I have, I'll provide those. All right, so we'll go ahead and just create our own from scratch, and we're going to create one for Stormbite and keep this simple. So what we'll do is, under my Bard tag I have here set up, what I'm going to do is just hit create new spell panel. And that's going to give me this new one, and then we can name that whatever we want. So kind of how you see I have Bard dots, and both my trackers for my dots are under that. But we'll just give this something easy for this example. And then under the spell panel, I'm going to hit create new, and I want a spell. So I'm going to name this test Stormbite. Alright, so that's our first step in setting up a new tracker. And if we hit this wrench icon, it will toggle it. And so it's right here with this crazy large text. And so this is kind of the default way it shows up. And obviously that's very different from how mine displays. And so I'll go through the process of how we manipulate this to show how we want it to. All right, so a really important thing about using this plugin, and we'll go ahead and cover that now before we get into setting it up within the plugin, is this plugin reads based off what's in your battle log here. Meaning that you can track any type of event that comes into the battle log. So we need to make sure that the event that we're looking to track is actually being pushed to our battle log. So if we can go into our chat log settings, we can click on battle, and then under the battle tab, what I have is everything under the subject U. Make sure that all these are enabled, because that'll be important for tracking anything that you're doing specifically. And then you can go through here and you can enable all the events for your party members. That way, say you wanted to create a tracker for, battle litany or sneak attack that one of your teammates is using. You got to make sure that these are enabled so that that event will push down to the battle log. And so you can go through here and enable anything that you think you need to have enabled to track. There's lots in here that you may not need to, like, pets and companions in the party. I'm never going to make a tracker for any of this stuff, so I don't need any of this data going into my battle log. But it's totally up to you. Customize it as you see fit, but make sure that everything under you specifically is marked, because that'll be the most important part of this. So once you have all that turned on, basically anytime you use an ability, so we'll use Burst Shot here, we can see you use Burst Shot shows up in the log. If I use Stormbite, you use Stormbite shows up, and etc. Barrage, Refulgent, all that good stuff. It also shows, like, we use Barrage and it says, hey, you gain the effect of Barrage, you gain the effect of Straight Shot Ready, that type of deal. So we can track just about anything related to our events. So once we have that data going into our battle log, we can then make trackers based on the text that shows up here. So say we're making one for Stormbite. Alright, so first of all, what I like to do is fix the visual, because this isn't usable to me. So what I'll do is I'll set an icon over here. So we're in our visual, and we have this icon folder. You can click get icons, and I think it pulls the PNGs for all the icons. And so what we'll do is we'll just go to Bard. Let's see, Bard, and I think it sorts it alphabetically. So Stormbite, right there. So we'll set the icon, and we see our icon showed up right there. So, and we can change the size of the icon. So let's go to something bigger. All right, so now what we'll do is, I don't need to see the name of the ability, such as, this text is so large it looks like that, but it's test storm bite. I don't need to see that. So we can hit hide spell name. Also, I typically check hide not in combat, because I don't want to see the tracker unless I'm, actually in combat using it. And then let's see if there's anything else I have over here that I do differently. Oh yeah, this overlap recast time. This will be important as well. So I'll turn that on. And what that does is the timer, the actual clock overlaps onto the icon by checking this option. And so that's something I like as well. And then from there, we still have this progress bar right here. And I really don't like the progress bar. So for me, what I like to do is I just turn this progress bar width and height both to 0. And that essentially removes the progress bar. So let's make this a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. All right, so from here, we have some stuff we can do with customizing how this displays. You can go in here to the font settings. You can change the font to be as big as you want. You can change the font type, if it's bold or italic or whatever. And it'll change how it displays that tracker on top of the icon. You can change the fill color. So like right now, it's the inside of the text fill color is white. I can change it to yellow, change this to yellow. And the stroke color, of course, is the outline of the text. So right now it's set to black or blue. And, I could set it to something like, maybe something to be easy to see, crimson. And yeah, we can see the outside outline change to that crimson color. So you can kind of customize this, find what works for you, and just kind of play with it. That's a big thing about all of this is just, finding what works for you and customizing it until something vibes well. Let's change it back to black. All right, and then we have this warning fill color and warning stroke color. And what that will do is we can set it to where, based on a specific amount of seconds left in the recast, it will change the font color and stroke, essentially. So for my Stormbite, what I have it do is, normally it's set to just, black and with this blue outline. But once it gets down to like 3 seconds left, mine changes to this white inner and this orange-red outline. And so to just kind of show what that looks like. So we're not actually going to see that change until my dot hits 6 seconds. And you can change this to be however you want it to be. But this right here, this controls when this warning fill and warning stroke color actually applies. And then you have the setting change font to warning color. And then we see at 6 seconds it changed. So you can play with those as well, depending on how you want to perceive it. And then I think that's pretty much everything on the visual. You can customize this to your heart's content. And then under notice here, we have where we can set it up to where it'll apply a sound effect based on some different factors. And you heard the beep go off a second ago. This sounded like that. So what I do is under this, got a couple different categories, but under this notice when log matches after n seconds, it plays this beep, and I set that to 3 seconds. So what that means is once my dot hits 3 seconds left, it plays that sound effect, and that's just kind of an added little touch. That way, if I'm dealing with a lot of mechanics, at the very least, that sound effect will cue me up that I need to refresh. It's something I really don't rely on anymore, but I've just never changed to remove it. But when I was first learning Bard, this did help me out quite a bit. Eventually, you'll get to the point where when you're going to refresh your dots well before this ever tells you. But getting into the motion of it, the sound effect can help you out while you're still learning it. All right, so finally is how do we set it up to actually track the skill that we want it to track, in this case, the Stormbite. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus on this keyword to show right here. Let's go into our actual test one. This keyword to show, this is where we type in the battle log text of what we want to actually track. In our case, you use Stormbite. So we can go over here, we use the skill, right? And then we can copy that out of the battle log and throw it into our keyword to show. So now every time we use Stormbite, this is going to activate this tracker we just created. But we have to set up a few other things on top of that. So we know our dots are on 30-second timers, right? So we want to set this recast time to 30 seconds because that's the duration of the dot. So once we set this to 30 seconds, it now understands that this is going to start from 30. So now if we use it again, and let me make sure mine are disabled. It started at 30 and started counting down. So if I had set this to 50, it would start at 50 instead. So you just start it at the the duration. If you have an 80-second cooldown, you set it to 80 seconds. So for our dots, they're 30 seconds long. And now we have to figure out how do we refresh that dot, the tracker timer. And we can do that by using this keyword to extend. So obviously there are two ways to refresh the dot for our Stormbite. We can either use Stormbite again, or we can use Iron Jaws. So, and right here, we'll type in the number of seconds that it will extend. So we'll type in 30 because it's going to go back to 30 seconds. So let's do that. So it starts. And then every time we use Stormbite again, it'll automatically refresh it back to 30. But there's also Iron Jaws, so we need to make sure we're tracking that as well. And we have that set to extend the tracker back to 30. So for this, I'll use Stormbite. We saw that refreshed it back to 30. Or if we hit Iron Jaws, that will put it back at 30 as well. So that takes care of tracking it, creating the timer, and being able to refresh it back to its full duration to help us in our rotation. Let me see if there's anything else here that I do. Yeah, okay. So right here we can set the number of seconds of when it changes to the warning color, and that's the warning fill and stroke as well. So for mine, I have this 6 seconds, and it says change font to warning color. At 6 seconds, it starts to blink the icon as well. So you can set those up for it. And then you can also filter this to where, this tracker can only activate no matter what if you're on, the Bard DPS class. Otherwise, it will never activate. This job filtering can be good for certain situations, but just knowing that it's here for you to use if you need it. And then there's also, some more filters based on, party composition and all that, or what zone you're in. I don't even know what the zone filter is, to be honest. I never use it. But yeah, that's the general idea behind it. That goes through, how to create it visually, how to set up the tracker for it, and everything. And then, we can obviously move this wherever we want. We can change the size of it, depending on how big we want it to be and all that. Jesus, that is small. And for me, because of how I have my layout set up, I like to put the dots on the left and right of my GCD refulgent arrow that I'm watching for the GCD timer. So let me go ahead and disable that, and I'll turn mine back on. So you can see how I've placed mine right here. And then where's my Raging Strikes? And I put my Raging Strikes just right here above it, just to be able to track that. I have, when I'm using Raging Strikes, obviously I have it show up right here. But you know, regardless, the point is that it's in the direct center of my screen where my eyes are. So obviously I can see this on the side over here, but this allows me to stare straight at everything going on right here in front of me instead of having to shift my eyes over and you know, refocus on something outside on my peripheral. So that's the general idea behind everything. It is pretty easy once you just get in here and play with this stuff. It takes some time to learn it, you know, a lot of trial and error. But once you get the general idea down, you know, at the very least, you just mess up a lot until you finally figure out your own system for creating these. And so that's the general overview for how to create these trackers and kind of display them like you'd like. There's a lot more you can do with this stuff. Really, all I do is the bare minimum. And, you know, I like to keep things minimalistic, so that's what I use it for. Hopefully everything I went over and rambled about at least provides you guys with some direction and some help as far as setting up these trackers for these abilities. Like I said, there's a lot you can do with these things, and it really just depends on how much time you want to put in to really customize it to exactly how you want it to be. And so hopefully I've provided at least enough context for you to get started down that road on your end. Of course, I'll provide I'll export these out and provide the files for Stormbite, Cactbot, and Raging Strike imports, so you can just import each of these and, you know, move them around on your screen, put them where you want them, and not have to worry about it beyond that. But like I said, I thought it was important to go through the process of how they actually work, how you set these up. That way you kind of have an idea of how it all actually works. There's more stuff I could get into with this, specifically around this use regex, which is regular expressions. It's a pattern matching language, and for us on Bard, we don't really have to ever touch this, but I was making some stuff for my summoner, and I had to use it in order to track 2 different events in a single line. That's more advanced stuff, and regex is a beast of its own. But for the, you know, just the idea of just making your own trackers at the very least, hopefully I've covered that well enough to give you at least a starting point. And like I said, you can just import mine at the very least. So I think this video is probably long enough by this point of going over everything I have. So the only 2 other things to kind of go over are my DPS tracker up here, which is really easy and simple to set up. And then the other part is the Cactbot displace, which is the DBM from WoW, essentially. Both those are plugins you can search on the web and find them on GitHub and get the latest releases. And you know, it's the same idea for the setup. Is, you know, once you have them downloaded, the DLLs, you have to have this one called Overlay plugin, and then the one for Cactbot you'll need is Cactbot Overlay as well. So you'll find both these plugins and enable them, and then from there you'll be able to create these overlays for, like, you know, your Cactbot or your DPS overlay I have up there, and that type of idea. But for time's sake, I'll just I'll put that stuff in a different video. So, and yeah, I think that pretty much covers everything I wanted to get across today. I hope, at the very least, it was useful. I know I rambled quite a bit, but yeah, I never expected that first video to do near what it had. So beyond thankful for the people who have commented and asked for a UI setup video. That's really cool to see. I just made that video for a friend who was learning Bard. Like I didn't put a lot of effort into it. I just get the general idea down. But I thought at the very least, I'll put it on my YouTube channel. Maybe someone else might get some use out of it. And so that was really awesome to see that you guys enjoyed it, and it was actually helpful. So I don't have any delusions of grandeur about my YouTube channel or anything like that. I just like making little videos that might help someone out. So it's pretty cool to see, and hopefully at the very least some of this stuff was actually helpful. So again, thank you all for taking the time and commenting, and it's been super cool. And I'll see what else I can come up with. And if you guys have any questions about anything concerning anything in this video or just in general, feel free to ask, no matter how simplistic or dumb the question is you may think. This stuff takes a lot of time to learn, especially ACT, and I've spent hours with it myself, so don't hold back. If you have a question, feel free to ask, and I'll do my best to help answer it. I don't know everything, but what I do know, I'll try to help out with. And yeah, so one final time, thanks again, and I'll see you in whatever other shenanigans we get into. Thanks. Oh God! Save me! Rescue Coco. Damn it.